Well, Marty, welcome to Live Your Life with Purpose podcast. I'm certainly excited to connect and really kind of talk about some old school days as we went to high school together, and
Yeah.
really talk about you following a passion that you have for comedy and really what that journey has been like. So really excited to connect.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
long time no see, no talk. So this is
Yeah,
great.
I mean it's crazy. We spent 4 years, 89 to 92. Not to
Yep.
date us, but
I was just gonna say. I was gonna
it
say we
is
don't
what
want
it
to tell
is.
people. It is. It is what it is. You can't help it.
Yeah,
The clock.
47. Yeah, 47 just ticked. So it's it happens.
See, I'm young. I went in as a baby, so I'm not 47 yet. So I still have that feather in my
Very
cap
good.
for 7 more months. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, man. You're as old as you feel. Which after this year, I'm clocking in somewhere around 90, 95, 96, I think.
A
Um,
lot of people, it's been a tough, all of it,
Brutal.
but I mean, especially with comedy and being out in front of people, I mean,
Yeah.
this has had obviously had a huge impact on what you do and all of that, right? I
Well, yeah,
mean,
man, and I mean, to how I followed the passion is not the way I'm like. If anyone is listening to this and they're trying to figure out like, hey, what's my journey? What's my passion? How I'm going to do it? Um, I mean, you were in enough classes with me. I was kind of a little bit of a class clown and kind of a wise ass and kind of I tried to get some laughs because it was better than doing work. Um, a-
right?
as I always said, I used to go to I don't know, a lot of people don't know this, but I used to be in Sister Julie's office so often that I used, because I lived in Chicopee, which is farther from Cathedral where we went to high school. So I
Yeah.
used to my mother would have to pick me up from Mass Mutual a lot of the times, and
Mm,
I would just say she just knew to pick me up. We used to get out at 1:52, if you remember that, but if you had
hmm.
detention, you got out like 2:27 or something like that, and
Yeah.
my mother just knew to come at 2:30 to pick me up because I would have detention. And the secret was, if I didn't have a detention that day, I knew I still like, and I wanted to do work or whatever. I knew
You
I
still had
could
the
just,
time.
I had a free pass to get a detention. So I would sit around in class and I would be like, where's my shot, man? Where am I going to get the good laugh? And
That was my seventh grade. I had
yep.
quite a bit of detention in seventh grade. It was that was a bad year.
Yeah, I mean, Sister Julie candidly told me that she believed I had the record. She wasn't sure because of the history of the school, but she believed I had the record. My mother was number back then. They had the old phones with the. She had the big white phone with
Yeah.
the buttons, and there would be like, I think there was like 10 or 20 things. My mom was number 7, so she would hit 7 and it would go directly to my mother.
So
And
one of the best things was that so my sister went to Cathedral before I did, and she worked and she was like very proper with everything that she
yeah,
did, and so she was always in school on time and did all of that different stuff. And I remember I used to pick up Steve De Silva and we'd
yeah,
drive in together, and uh, there was a time where we were just like we didn't feel like going to school. We went to play pitch and putt, and we called in and said we had a flat tire, and then the spare was flat, so we're waiting for AAA, and and I feel horror about all of this stuff. But I mean, we spent the morning playing pitch and putt, instead of going to school and all of that other fun stuff. But I mean,
Every,
it's
everyone at Cathedral used to. So full disclosure, I didn't hang out like with most of the kids in our class because I was from Chicopee. So I hung out with all my
yeah,
friends at Chicopee High.
yeah,
But everyone at Cathedral, the two things I remember is everyone would skip and they would go to Friendly's for breakfast over on Sumner Ave. And the other thing is like once a year they would do a keg party in the woods at Nathanville, right?
oh yeah, yeah.
And everyone would, Nathanville was a park, right? That's
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and in case anyone was listening, but they would do a keg party in the woods, and I remember distinctly, like everyone would come in, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, like we had the party." And I used to laugh because like Chicopee was full of raging alcoholics. Like I started drinking when I was 10. I could split a bottle. I could split literally a liter of vodka with my friend when we were 11 years old. Like that's the way things
Mm-hmm.
were in Chicopee.
Yeah.
And I was like, "There's no way that all you are getting that drunk off of one keg." Because I'd be like, "How many kegs?" He's like, "One keg." I'm like, "There's no one's getting that drunk on one keg." Like I used to
Yeah. No,
kick a keg
it's
with 20 of my friends in the cemetery. We
mm-hmm.
we we'd kill a keg and then we'd be like, "Should we get another one? Let's get a quarter barrel." So I always laughed at that, but yeah, man, I no, that's fun. And Steve De Silva is a funny, and it would be a good guest for you too. would be Joe Giza. Do you remember Joe?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because he does a lot with like
Oh, that, yeah.
media, sports media or something in
Yeah,
Boston.
he does some great stuff out there.
Yeah, so me, Giza, Bob White, there was a group of us. We all were on freshman soccer. That's
Hmm.
when I think of Steve. I used to always bust because he's Portuguese, and I used to always tell him that he was good at soccer because his parents probably fed him fish eyes and goat balls. Um, Portuguese food was always weird to me back then. Now I love it, but it was always weird to me back then. Um,
It's crazy.
but yeah, so how I got into comedy was crazy, man. So I liked making people laugh. I always liked, doing that. Ironically, even though I didn't go to Chicopee High, I got nominated in for their superlatives for class clown. It's
Stop.
hilarious. No, I swear to God, I got nominated for 3 things there, and I didn't go there.
And you're gonna go there. It
No,
is
no.
wild.
Yeah, it was really funny. I got my buddy and I got nominated for best friends and like one other. It was like 2 other things, and class clown was one of them. But and then when I was in college, that was the thing. Obviously, I was like the school clown, and I used to book the comedians at my college. I
Oh,
was
cool.
around comedy my whole life. I loved it. It was a pipe dream for me. I used to
Yeah.
friggin' daydream about it, and
So it was something that you've always kind of saw yourself doing, or no?
when I was a kid, my father and we had a bedtime even when I was in grammar school and high school and
Yeah.
everything, and my father was very strict about staying up late and watching TV, but on Friday nights he would watch Carson,
Hmm.
and then it would be Leno. But I watched the comedians on Carson, and I used to be like, I wanted, that I wanted. My dad was like, well, don't get any ideas, like clown,
Hmm.
like the old
Hmm.
generation, like you're gonna get a job
Okay.
in a factory and you're gonna like it.
Hmm.
Then I went off to college, and I ended up booking the comedians for my college. So I booked like guys like Jeff Ross before he was Jeff Ross. He used to be
Oh,
Jeff
wow.
Bershowitz and stuff. Yeah, and some of them would come in and they'd be like, "Hey, man," I would have dinner with them before they would perform, and they would be like, "Hey, man, can you do me a favor? Just go out on stage there and just like warm them up a little bit. Just like I go, I don't know, what do you want to? Just talk to them, get them to laugh a few times or whatever." So I would go out and I would do that or whatever, and I loved it. I thought it was cool, but I didn't even realize what I was doing. And
Yeah.
then I had another near brush with it. I was probably around 26, maybe 26, 27, something like that. And my buddy had a bachelor party, and yeah, obviously his future wife was like, "You can have entertainment, but it better not be a stripper." And
Hmm.
he was like, "I'm hiring a comedian." So he hired this comedian out of Boston, very funny guy out of Boston. This kid Tony. Um, he hired Tony, and uh, uh, Tony came in, and they were like, "Why don't you do a set before Tony?" And
Hmm.
I was like, "Well, I don't know what a set is, but if you want me to go up and make people laugh," they're like, "Yeah." They just go up and do like make people laugh for like 10 minutes. And I went up, and that was the first time I
And
knew I
10
was.
minutes is a lot to
Oh,
go up, and especially with not having really any material or anything kind of like planned. That's a long
right,
time to.
and it doesn't really count as the first time I did comedy, if I'm really being honest, because the bachelor party was all guys I knew. It was at the American Legion Hall in
Yeah.
freaking
Yeah.
Chicopee on the Springfield line, and I went up and I was making everyone laugh, and I felt like I was like, wow. And my adrenaline was going so much that when it came time to welcome the comedian to stage, I forgot his name. So I was like, this is your guy. He's been on Comedy Central. He's really funny, Tony. And then I was like, I just completely spaced, right?
Well, yeah, but
So
you were in kind of like
actually,
your zone, right?
yeah, I
Like
didn't even
you
remember his
forget
first name. I didn't.
yeah.
I remember nothing. And then they came up, and I apologized to him after, and he was laughing. He's like, "Ah, you got the rush on." I was like, "Yeah, I did." And that was it, man. And then, like an idiot, I still didn't listen to the call. It was
It
so
took you a little
larger
while.
than. If you
Yeah.
had asked me how do you get into comedy, I would have said unless you go to New York City, you can't get into comedy. I didn't even know it was accessible to me.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
fast forward to like I'm like maybe 32, 33 years old. Um, I had real rough. I was going to the gym a lot. I was going to health tracks in West Springfield, working
Hmm.
out. Long story short, we had a baby, and it was a rough birth, and so I was like Mr. Mom, and I was, it was just like I needed to burn off energy. So I was going to the gym and health tracks, and I had heard a few times about this guy who was a local guy who was a comedian, but he had a stage name, so I didn't know his name.
Mm.
And I knew he went to that gym, and I knew he had a condo in my friend's complex. So when I sold her condo, the guy the builder told my realtor we were we were doing the nozzles where the washing machines plug in, and my friend
Okay.
Shannon, who's like one of my best friends, we've still the best of friends. We've been friends for 30 some odd years, 32 years.
That's awesome.
I was selling her the condo. She turned the thing, and the water blew out all over her white blouse. And without missing the beat, I turned to the broker and I go, "Listen." And I was her agent. I turned to the broker and his agent. I go, "Listen, if that doesn't get 5 grand off this thing, I don't know what's going to get 5 grand off." And he started laughing. And he was like, "Oh my God." And I just kept going. And he's like, "Man, you're fun." Yeah, he goes, "You're just as funny as Dario." And I was like, "Who's Dario?" And he's like, "Well, he has a condo here. He's a professional comedian." And I was like, "What?" You know? And they're like, "But he's got a name. We don't know what his stage name or what." It turns out it was my buddy Dario, who's now one of my best friends.
That's
Um,
great.
he wasn't a professional comedian. He was a guy. He would freely admit this. He was a guy who did comedy at like open mics and a
Hmm.
show here or there in the city and stuff. But to me, that was larger than life at this time. You know what I
Well,
mean?
it was more than what you were doing, and he was
Yeah,
out there, right?
thousand
So,
percent, 1000%. And so I when I realized someone told me he went to the gym, and they said his stage name. He used to have a stage name. I made him drop his stage. He was called Mo Green. He was obsessed with the mob, so he was like, "I was a Mo Green from The Godfather." That was his
from The
stage name.
Godfather.
Yeah, yeah.
I love it.
So they're like, you're. This guy goes, "Man." He had these sandals on. I was like, "Okay, Jesus, why don't you give me more advice to work my delts? Hey," and I was like, doing a whole thing. And everyone's laughing in the lobby, and he's like, "Bro, I think you might be funnier than Dario." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, Mo Green." And I was like, "What? The guy, the comedian?" They're like, "Yeah." And I was like, "He goes here?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh my God, I want to talk to him." Like, "Well, he's
Yeah.
coming down the hallway right now." So he comes in, and the guy goes, "Dario, this guy's funnier than you." And Dario gets mad. He goes, "Oh, you think you're funnier than me?" And I was like, "I didn't say it. Fucking Jesus with the sandals said it. I didn't say it." So he said, "Well, if you think you're funnier than me, how about we do a show? I'll bring you up on stage, see how funny you are on stage. You can follow me next Tuesday. I have a show." I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know that following you should have scared the hell out of me, but I was
Yeah.
just like, "Yeah, let's do
Sometimes
it."
ignorance is bliss, right?
Totally.
Like,
And I was like, "Let's do it." And he was like, "Really? You're going to do it?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "All right." He's like, "We're going to do it." So he got half the gym to come out or whatever. And we jumped in his car. We went out there. It was probably like 40 people. It was this little open mic in Worcester at the worst place in Worcester. It was a place called 3G's Sports Bar. It was in the Kelly Square in the ghetto. People used to overdose on heroin while you're on stage and shit. And that was
wow.
where I first went up. And he went up, he did well, and then I went up. I had like 4 or 5 beers. I just bullshitted tell stuff that made my friends laugh on the golf course, and then the next thing I knew, the guy running the mic is a very funny comedian. He's Orlando Baxter. He tours
Oh
with
yeah.
Joe Coy and everything. Orlando came up to me and he goes, "Hey, is this really your first time doing comedy?" I go, "Yeah, this is really, I mean, my first official time doing comedy." And he's like, "You stay with this. You could do this as a career." And that's all I needed to hear. I was like, "Wait,
Mm.
people will
Like,
pay me for that shit?" He was like, "Yeah, that's all." I was like, "Dude, I'll do whatever you ask me to do." And he was like, "All right, I'm going to help you." And he helped me right along.
oh,
He
that's
still
great.
helps me. He still helps.
Yeah.
He's still a mentor to me in a lot of ways. Now we're more peers. Like we'll call each other and bounce stuff off each other for advice or stuff. But there are
Hmm.
still plenty of times I can call him and he can enlighten me to stuff. He's like a
That's great.
mentor.
Yeah.
And that was it, man.
That's wild. I mean,
Yeah.
and especially because for me, I love talking to people one on one.
Hmm.
But then when you get me into a group and all of a sudden the sweat that drips down my back is immense. You know what I
People,
mean? So it's
it's
crazy that it's just like, but there are people that obviously like yourself where no worries whatsoever. Like it's
doesn't phase me. I've done 6,000 people. I've done the Mullet
yeah,
Center. I've done 3,000. I've done 1,500. I've done five. I've done
yeah,
it after a while it doesn't. It used to give me nerves. Now it doesn't. It's a very rare scenario where I'll have any type of nerve before I go on stage. It's just
yeah.
which kind of sucks, to be honest, because it's kind of like like a football play. Yeah, when we went to school,
Sometimes
Mike.
it, so yeah, like sometimes you get you hyped
Yeah.
up a little bit.
Have you had? I know you were good friends with Mike Flynn, right? I didn't really know
Yeah.
Mike that well, but have you had him on here yet? He's another
No,
guy.
no, no. I haven't really talked to Mike since high school.
He'd be another guy to talk to, right? That guy.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, for those who don't know, Mike ended up, he has a couple Super Bowl rings, I think, with the Ravens or something like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously made millions of dollars. But if you asked Mike Flynn, like, hey, buddy, does anything get you fired up anymore the way walking into like, a sold out stadium with people cheering your
Sure.
name got you? He'd be like, nah, man, it's just, nah. And even after doing that for a few times, I think that adrenaline probably wears off. Like, everyone's screaming around you, and you're just like wrapping your hands, like, oh god, yeah, I got to put the new cleats. It becomes old hat,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
totally.
and there are still shows once in a blue moon where I'll get fired up for them or whatever, but it doesn't happen much anymore. It's a job now. It's like a
Yeah.
legit job. But I slaved away doing open mics and all that shit and clawed out of that and started working in. I was fairly fat. I worked in my first comedy club like 6 months into comedy, which is unheard of. But
Mm.
um, and then I was just chipping my way up. Bigger show, bigger show, bigger show. Hey, here's $20, kid. Here's $50.
Mm-hmm.
Just chipping your way up and I was working a day job the entire time, and a lot of people didn't realize I worked a day job for a long time. It wasn't until not recently, but like in the last 4 years or so, or whatever it was, 5 years, 4 years, something like that, that I didn't have, I was able to make a living. It's not a great
Yeah.
living, but I was able to make enough.
To be able to support doing
Right.
that full time and not have to rely on another
Right, but
income.
what a lot of
Yeah.
people don't realize is you lose money before you even break even. Then you break even, then you get to a point where it's like a little part time job, and then you get to a point
Yeah.
where you're like, it's a pretty good part time job. And, hey, yeah, I just paid for this for with that. You start,
Yeah.
and then you get to a point where it's like, ah, shit, like I gotta fly here, I gotta fly there, and I can't
Well,
do
and
that.
that's a big thing, right? Like
Yeah,
that's a big jump to make,
yeah,
regardless of the industry,
yeah,
to say to yourself that I am now going to rely solely on
yeah.
myself and go out there and do this on your own, regardless of what you're doing, but especially comedy, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's a grind.
It's a leap of faith. It's a grind. It's all those things. And for anyone that's looking to follow purpose, I always told people the way I approached comedy was I always had a short term, a mid term, and a long term goal.
Yeah.
And my short term is short as I'm going on stage that night and I want to work on a new joke, or I want to tell a joke that I used to tell a different way, or
Hmm.
I want to work on crowd work. I don't want to work on crowd. Like, I had all these things that I would set for a goal every time I went out, every show, thousands of
Yeah.
shows. And if
Yeah.
you accomplish those ones, then your midterm ones start coming, and then your long terms. And one of my longer term ones that was between mid and long term was I was like, I want to get on a plane to do comedy. And then once you're flying, 20 weekends a year, 30 weekends a year, you're just like, do I have to get on another goddamn plane?
But
And
but that's a great point, because I think that a lot of people sometimes will know all of the work that it takes, but aren't planning those goals, aren't
nope,
seeing not only short term but long term goals. Like, why are you doing what you're doing today, and how is that going to benefit you in the future? And if
right,
you don't have those things, that long term vision with this short term execution, then you can't make those things happen for yourself. But also the
yep,
power that comes from making those things happen for yourself,
sure,
telling
sure,
yourself that you want to do comedy and have to take a plane in order to get there. And then once that happens, only because you made that happen, I mean, there's such a sense of accomplishment when that happens, correct?
yeah. I mean, it's a sense of accomplishment, and it comes in weird waves and weird moments. And then you have to remember to stay grateful for those things. Like I say,
Yeah.
after flying so much, I remember one time I was going through Logan. I was like doing a show in Canada. I knew I got up at like 2:30 in the morning to trudge to Logan. By the time I'm
Mm-hmm.
like 6 in the morning, I'm walking into Logan to take my flight. And I remember I'm in a shitty mood because I know I have a 16-hour travel day, and I got to do an hour on stage that night.
Yeah.
In Edmonton, Canada.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I remember stopping and making myself stop coming over the Sky Bridge at Logan and just take a breath and be like, this is what you wanted. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
should be grateful for
Yeah.
what you wanted. And then it changed my whole perception. Like, the whole weekend was better because of that, you know.
You know,
But
when I found gratitude in doing things, everything changed for me, and that's part of a daily practice that I have. It's part of a daily practice that I give to everyone that I coach, because
yep,
it's hard to be in this negative place and get petty about some of these things that we have to do when you're not being grateful, right? When
right.
you take these things for granted.
Right, and also to your point, well, when you hit these goals, it's satisfying. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. If
Mm.
sometimes, so sometimes I wouldn't let myself be satisfied because I knew that comfort was the enemy of creativity.
Oh, sure.
I still am like that. I can walk off stage. Anyone who knows me, like comedians that know me, I'll walk off stage and it'll have gone well as far as the crowd was going or the other comics, and I'll be pissed at like angry at myself because I
Mm.
know I didn't do what I should have done. My goal was there. I made a bad choice. I shouldn't have told that joke. I did this. I still do that to myself.
Hmm.
I've gotten a lot better with it now because of COVID and everything. Now I'm
Yeah.
so grateful to
Yeah.
be on stage. It's slowed me down enough that I'm probably better on stage right now than I've ever been.
That's great.
Which is good. Creatively, I feel like I'm moving in the right direction. Um, but those moments that happen, some of them are like amazing. Like I've had some great ones. Like I used to. So when I was like 24, 25, I was working for Coca-Cola, which
Okay.
I would freely say was probably the shittiest job I ever had. And I hate saying it because my family, some of them worked for there and they were happy, but it was a it was a it was a meaningless job. It was literally a job where you were like spinning soda bottles and putting,
Or just
like
it didn't add any value to your to what you were. Yeah.
yeah, no, it was a living. I didn't have like a kid or family to worry about at that time, so it was like I was just doing it for whatever I was doing for money, and maybe
Yeah.
someday I could move up and make more. And I used to love Howard Stern. I would listen to Howard every morning, and I remember I would drive down the Berlin Turnpike in Connecticut and Newington, and my first stop was Cumberland Farms on Newington on the Berlin Turnpike. And on Monday morning, I knew he would always have Artie and the comedians talking about their weekend.
Yeah.
So I would run into the store and I would do the order and I would take all this and talk to the manager and then I'd be like, I gotta talk to my driver, and I would leave. I'd call my driver for like 2 seconds. I'd be like, yeah, everything's squared up, and then I would sit in the car and I would sit there for a good 45 minutes to an hour at 6 in the morning, and I would listen until they broke, until they went to their first
Yeah.
break, and then I would
Yeah.
run to my next stop, and I would do it all over again. I listen, and it was funny, years later. So all the guys on there, Florentine,
Yeah.
Nick DiPaolo, Artie, all those guys. Like years later, like I find myself working with them, and like it's
Pretty
like this,
surreal moments.
yeah, surreal. I mean, I had one the first time I worked with DePaulo. I walked into Green, he was like, "What are you smiling at?" And I was like, "What?" He just like started going at, and I was like, "Look, dude." And I told him the whole story, and I was like, "So forgive me if I'm a little happy. I'm friggin' working with you." And he was like, you made me feel bad. He's like, I like it. But yeah, stuff like that, and then now it's funny now being away from it. The girl I tour with, who I literally, she calls me brother. She's like my sister,
Yeah.
Jessie Mae Peluso. Now the stuff that I miss and that I'm really going to be grateful to have back is less to do with the stage and or money when that comes back
Yeah.
to the business or all that. It's really going to be to spend time with the people, with other comics, and like
Yeah.
with her and I on the road together. We haven't
You
seen
could.
each other, for a year.
I remember some of the stuff that you guys have posted. I mean, it's some funny stuff. Like,
Yeah,
I
we
mean, just some of the behind the scenes things that you guys do while you're not on stage is hilarious.
we have the best of times. Like when we're on the road. There's a video that kind of went viral, but we rented those stuffed animal scooters
Yeah.
and did that at the mall. We got drunk on them. I hit a baby. I ran over a baby with
Oh,
mine. Like, oh, it's
jeez.
hilarious. The baby's fine,
Yeah.
but and a Canadian baby, so free healthcare.
Yeah.
And then we broke into the comedy club on our little scooters. Our dear friends Tammy and Rick own the comedy club, so like we knew that they wouldn't care. We snuck in under the ticket booth on the thing, and we went in and we stole beers out of the cooler. We're
Yeah,
just drinking beers, cruising around the mall, drunk on our little scooter. We had like, and there's a million of those type of things, like
yeah,
that we
yeah.
do. And to not, we were just talking about, like, we FaceTime a lot, and we're like, dude, we haven't seen each other in over a
It's
year.
just not the same, and it's
No,
it's listen, I think that certainly FaceTime helped bring people together
sure,
in lots of different ways, and certainly Zoom calls and get
yep,
creative with all of that. Um, you know, just the human connection that people have been deprived from, the past year is intense
it's
for
yes,
everybody.
listen, it's broken a lot of friends of mine. I've lost a lot of friends. In fair full disclosure, I told you about the one this morning, and I got to a point with the COVID stuff where, I believe in it. I know it's real. I'm hoping everyone's getting vaccinated. As soon as I get the opportunity to, I will.
Yeah.
Um, I I also think that the damage to the national psyche and to the mental health of everybody has been really compounded. Like, it's
Mm,
really, in my lifetime, I've never seen anything like this.
yeah. Yeah.
I really haven't. And the one thing that bothers me is when they're putting out these like COVID relief bills. I never hear anything about them putting money in for
Like
psychiatric
mental
and
health
psychological mental health.
and
Yeah.
just any of that, because and I was just talking to a woman. I'm going to be releasing her podcast tomorrow, where she's in the pharmacy. She's a tenured professor at UConn,
Okay.
and um, just the impact on teaching, having kids at home, teaching them, and having all of a
It's
sudden all of these worlds kind of collide. And how do you do all of it? um she didn't break down during our conversation, but we talked about the many breakdowns that have,
yep.
and the tears that have been shed over the past years is intense, and it's real. And you know when I first started journaling, part of it was for my own mental health,
Right.
because I'm a very sensitive individual. I'm empathetic. I feel feelings, that people have,
Yeah. I'm.
and
Yep.
and some of what comes with that are kind of high highs, low lows, right? Like, when we get into these different places. And so journaling helped me kind of get out of that space. But if we don't have any productive things that we give ourselves, um, then all of a sudden, all of these compounding things that have happened over 2020, even if we have good ways, like, I mean, she was an avid fitness,
Yeah.
individual, and even then she found herself not doing the things that she normally would have.
Yep. Well, I mean, for me, I was already working out and trying to get back in shape. I was probably, I mean, for people at home, right now I'm a
And you
little.
look great, by the
Thanks,
way.
thanks,
Like,
buddy.
you, I,
Thanks.
I, I know you've had a journey, and you look
Yeah, I
fantastic.
I dropped like probably from my heaviest to like when I was my lightest, which is like the end of last summer. I probably dropped close to 100 pounds. Like
Yeah,
it was like 80 something since I was keeping track, but I know I was
yeah,
even heavier than that. But
good for you.
yeah, thanks, man. I put a little back on. I'm not gonna lie, the last 2 months. So now I just
Yeah, but
walked.
it is what it is.
I walked like 5.5 miles today, but I
Yeah.
know that until I can get where I can work out without a mask on and I can go to a gym and feel safe. I'm like,
Mhm.
I just, as soon as the weather gets warm, I got to get back out there and start walking. So that's what I'm doing. I'll start hiking and walking and jogging and all that stuff.
And you've
But
been doing a lot of fun stuff with food, right? Like, I mean, I saw some of that,
yes,
finding some different creative ways to occupy some time so that you don't do any or get into any more maybe bad habits, right?
so
Is
yeah. So
that
my COVID journey, as I like to say, started with I was doing to have some semblance of normalcy. I was doing a lot of these things, not Zooms, but I was doing like I did some shows on Zoom, but I was doing a lot of lives on Facebook or lives on Instagram. So
yeah.
when I would walk, I would take my phone with me and I would take everyone for a walk with me, and I would just talk about the news and the day or whatever, and I would do a hike through the woods. And I didn't think anything of it when I was doing it, but when I stopped doing it, people were like, "Are you going to walk today?" Like they would
Man,
message
are
me.
you?
They're like, "Are you going to walk?" So, and then I felt like obligated to walk, like I was leaving them in their house or something. I was like, you can walk too. Like you can, like one of my friends that was saying, like lives closer to where I walked than I did, and I was like, you could walk, like you don't need me to
Yeah,
do it. But then it became like a pressure thing where I was like, I wasn't doing it. I was getting, so then I was like, well, I don't. The natural part of me is like, I don't want to do it if I feel like I have to do it. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
And
yeah.
and
Now
then
it's an obligation.
yeah, and then I would do these lives at night. I had a thing on Instagram called the Instagram dive bar, and I would come on at night and I would sit here and I would drink some beers and I would have everyone on. I would put whoever came in on. I still do it once in a blue moon, and
Yeah,
there was not a lot, but maybe like 60 people was the average listener. But those 60 were super engaged to it. They loved it,
that's
and
great.
but then one of them got mad because I said something that bothered her or whatever. And after that, I just ruined it for me. I was like, I'm doing this for free. Like, I don't need the aggravation. So
I'm just
so
trying to
then,
entertain.
yeah, so then I stopped doing everything. So I just turned into like a hermit, and all I was doing was drinking by myself over here, talking to myself in the thing, and and then I got to a point where, to your point about cooking, I was like, I need to keep myself busy,
Hmm.
so I was like, I'm going to figure out how to cook. I've always wanted to learn how to cook, so I'm going to figure out how to cook. So that was a good 4 or 5 months trying to teach myself. I still do it, and I still try to teach myself new
Hmm.
meals and new ways to cook and get better. My techniques are all shit, I'm sure, but I can cook now. So I,
It's fun, right? Like and that just goes to show, like, you can do things with the time that you have,
yeah,
like, or you
yes.
could have just sat on the couch and watched movies for
Well, I
days on
did.
end, which I'm sure, it was a
I
part
did
of
some.
what everyone
Yeah,
has done during COVID, right? Like,
yeah.
we've all watched more TV than we wanted to, but
For a guy in the entertainment business, you would think I watch way more TV and movies than I do. If I told you all the movies I've never seen, you would be like, you're not a real person. You're not like,
hmm,
I've never seen the Godfather movies. I've never seen, I think I saw maybe half of one Star Wars movie. I've never seen Breaking Bad. I've never seen Sons of Anarchy, Walking Dead, all those shows, Lost,
yeah,
all those shows everyone talks about, Game of Thrones. Never seen them.
yeah. I
So
haven't watched many of what you just mentioned either, though.
yeah,
That's actually pretty.
right. So like, so it wasn't so much that, I would be on the couch sometimes I had bouts of depression where I was on the couch for 3, 4, 5 days, but
Yeah, yeah.
so I was like, this isn't healthy, I got to do something. So I started teaching. So I taught myself how to cook. I posted that stuff on my Instagram, which one of my friends was kind enough to say, Jimmy Schubert, who's a legendary comic, world class comic. He goes, yeah, put up some comedy shit. I go to your page. I'm like, is this guy a chef? Does he rescue dogs? What's this guy do? He thinks he's a male model? Where's your comedy pictures? And I was like, there's not any fucking comedy for me to put up, Jimmy. Sorry.
Yeah.
But so I did that, and then I haven't announced. I've announced one thing, but I haven't announced the other. So then my buddy Joe Garrix was like, hey, do you want to do a podcast? So
Hmm.
we came up with an idea for a podcast. So that's what we've been doing. We just announced it last week. It comes out this Monday coming up.
Oh, awesome. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
This is good timing because I didn't even know that. So
Yeah. No, it'll be cool.
that's great.
Yeah, so it's called it's called Good Advice for Bad Ideas. So this interesting concept. We take people who've done some bad ideas and we get their advice from them. So like our first episode, I think, is a girl who is like she's a comic, but she's like kind of like I guess a sex worker. I guess you could talk about it.
Okay.
So we have a conversation with her. A guy who's a buddy of mine who I met after a show, who was just like a fan, but he's now a friend. He robbed banks, and he was a member of Whitey Bulger's, kind of like the Winter Hill. He grew up
No.
in Winter Hill. So
Wow.
so we had him on. We had my friend Mary Jo, who decided to climb Mount Everest on a whim, and
Holy cow.
that didn't really work out well. So I mean, I bought my buddy Mike, who's a comic, is really funny. He talked about scamming his way. He scammed his way onto the court to raise Reggie Lewis's banner. He scammed his way onto a movie set and into a movie. He wasn't even hired. He was in a movie. Like, we have these like crazy people on telling these like crazy things, and but that's been a creative outlet, which is good. And
Yeah.
then I wasn't doing anything in the business world back in the day. The last thing I did in business was I was doing digital consulting for businesses, SEO, SEM, all that stuff.
Hmm.
And I'll say it here because I don't know when this comes out, but it'll probably be public knowledge by then. But my
It'll probably be a couple of weeks.
oh, good. All right, it'll be out by then. So, my buddy Mike Barrasso, who used to own the Hippodrome, I helped him with some stuff for one of his other businesses, and he was like, "You could make this a business," and I was like, "I don't want to get in business," you know. I was like, "I'm out. I'm just doing comedy," you know.
Yeah.
But then the pandemic hit, and he's like, "You want to just start a business? Like, we'll own it. Like, it's you don't have to work for anyone. You just." And I was like, I mean, I'd be a real lazy piece of shit if I'm like, "No, I don't. Yeah, sorry, I've got
I think I'm good.
yeah, I was like, all right, let's talk. We had lunch. We went to Nathan Bill's
Yeah.
bar, not the park. We had lunch, and so now we're partners in a new company called SEO to go. We have an app for businesses. We have it's the main company is called On the Go Digital Media.
Hmm.
So we've launched this company is now we have developers working for us. We have customer service in the UK. Like it's going to be like an
That's awesome,
international
Marty.
company. Yeah. So now I'm like, once we launch that, I'll be busy, obviously. But I'm like, what's my next thing I'm going to do for a creative outlet? You know.
Sure. Yeah.
And now, fortunately, comedy's slowly coming back around. The money's not really there because of reduced capacities and everything else.
Hmm.
You're back to the bottom of the barrel of just like, oh, yeah, chicken
This is
tenders,
what we
thanks.
can do.
Right?
Yeah.
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 Oh, you got a hotel, you know. But that'll be part of the creative outlet. I'll have that, and I'm toying around with some other ideas. But one thing I learned during this thing for everyone, like you say, is live your life with purpose. The hardest thing of this pandemic has been it's taken away all of our purpose. Like we don't.
That's it.
So you gotta redefine or find that purpose some way. You know.
Yeah.
And
And it's weird, yeah, because it can come and go.
yeah,
After taking care of my mom, I really looked back and I was just like, I don't know if I really ever had any passions that I was really kind of excited about and followed. And then it was just like, okay, well, if I don't have any passions for myself right now, and
what
I'm
am I doing?
starting fresh, what do I want to do?
Yep.
Like, what is going to get me excited? And so I call them shower thoughts, right? Like
Yep.
ideas that you have in the shower and you just
Yep.
don't really do anything with them because you never write them down, and then you get busy and you forget all about the things that
Yep.
gave you some excitement. But when you start writing those down and figuring out how they fit in your life, all of a sudden you take yourself in the direction that you want to go. And it's nice that you've been able to do that for yourself, because it's not an easy thing to get to.
No, and I will say this to anyone who is listening, much like I think we probably have a similar experience where our generation there was never about happiness. It was like get a good career, get your job,
And just work hard.
right, work hard,
Work 60 hours a week, work
right,
70, and then you'll just be rewarded with all of it.
right.
And
You get
just go.
your golden handshake or whatever. It was all bullshit, right? When you look at it now, but that's what our parents knew, and that's what the generation knew. No one
Yeah.
cared about anything bigger than like, well, how much money are you making, or what are you doing, or whatever, right?
Are you
So
happy? Like,
right,
that's
no one cared, right? And no one asked that question. Like, what kind of what kind of wuss are you? Oh, you got to be happy. Yeah, I was real happy. Going to the job site, Marty, every day. It's like that
Yeah.
was the attitude.
Yeah.
And anyone who's sitting there, I have a lot of friends too that are like bartenders and servers and stuff like that, and they're going through their 20s and they're like, I don't know what I want to do. They have this like nagging thing, like I don't know what and I just try to tell them like, you might not know what you want to do, or you might know what you want to do. You might. I said, take some time, think of the craziest thought that you think,
Hmm.
and then go try it, figure it out, one way or another, find a way to pursue it, even if it's the most minuscule way. Try something.
Hmm.
If you're like, oh, I want to be an actor, well, you know what? Go to Boston Casting and put your headshot in and tell them you would like to do an extra job on something, or like whatever. It doesn't even have to be art or entertainment
Yeah.
related.
But everyone, and I think that a lot of people look, and it's like these opportunities are supposed to come to me. And I think that that's
right.
where a lot of that stuff falls, is because if this is really what you want, then you've got to figure out how you're going to make your
Yep.
moves and how you're going to continue to progress. And then other people are there to help.
Sure.
But you still have to know what you want. You still have to figure out that piece And so it is. It's just a matter of self-discovery. And it's like we're not very good at things when we first try them. But
Nope.
after you do this, I mean, once I started the podcast, I was thinking about this for probably a year and a half. But I had this reluctancy because I didn't know what I needed in order to do a podcast. I didn't
Sure.
know like how all of this was going to go.
How do you
But then
start? That's the
how
big.
do
That's
you?
the same thing with
How,
comedy. How do you
I don't
start?
even. I don't even know. My buddy was. I asked my buddy. I was like, so where do I go to get a podcast? Like
Yep.
I didn't even know the basics of like where do people go in order to find this thing,
Yep.
And but then once I did my first one, that took me a year and a half to do. I was ready to do my 10th one.
Yep.
It was just this. All of the fire that inside. It was just
Yep.
like, yes, this was exactly what I was intending it for to be.
Yeah. And it's funny. I guess I try to tell people, everyone's like, where do I even start? That's like one of the common things I always hear from people. Like, where would I even start? So when someone tells me they wanted to try comedy, I immediately say, if you want to try comedy, you're dead serious about it. Here's my number. Call me up. I'll get you on stage somewhere, or I'll get you an open mic. I'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell people, you might like it, you might want to do it as a hobby, you might hate it. Try it 3 times and then see how you feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
But what I always emphasize to people who are like, I wouldn't even know where to start. Oh, start my own business? How would I even do that? You know what? Here's how you do it. Take a baby step. Take one step towards
It
whatever it
has to,
is that you think.
and that first step is so difficult for
That's it.
people. It's one of the most, it's the hardest thing to do, but that second step is so easy. It's
Because your mind tells you all the reasons you can't or shouldn't. I still suffer with that creatively. I'm like,
of course.
I should have an album out. Like, there's no doubt I should have an album out now, right? But every time I would come to it, I would be like, then I gotta have a recording, and I gotta do how do I? And then I gotta do. Oh my god! And now when this
You
thing's over,
overwhelm yourself with all of these things, and
yep,
it's like, okay, well, I could just break it down pretty easy and do this one thing.
right. You just take one step towards it, and then just don't turn around. Just don't turn around. Just keep taking a step every day towards whatever your goal is. Look, if you want to have a business where you build tree houses, and you're like, I don't even know how I would start that friggin' business. Well, you know what? Probably the first step might be call the local building inspector and tell him what your idea is, and then ask him what he thinks. That'd
Yeah.
be your first step.
First
You
one,
know?
yeah, build your own, and then
Yeah.
say, hey, you guys like this? Anybody want one?
Yeah. My one of my buddies, she's my good friend Mary Jo, the one that did Mount Everest. She had a point where, so she's out of work. She was struggling for money, and she's like, I don't even know what to do. I said, look, you can look at this as a negative, or you can look at it as a positive. This is an opportunity. She's like, what do you mean? I said, well, did you ever think about getting into business for yourself? Well, what could I possibly do? Well, listen, Mary Jo, every day when you used to work at the comedy club I worked at, you would bring in she would bring in all these crazy meals. She traveled the world, so she'd be like, "Oh, this is made with real Egyptian hibiscus. I smuggled it out in my backpack." Like all this crazy. But one of the things she made that was so good was her own peanut butter, and I was like, it was like her own peanut butter, and it was amazing. And I was like, "What about making peanut butter?" And she's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "What about making peanut butter?" She goes, "I wouldn't even know where to begin." I go, "Okay, well, I'm gonna come by. I'll pick you up. We're gonna go to Ocean State Job Lot. We're gonna buy a couple cases of empty jars, and then we're gonna see what they have for peanuts on sale, and we're gonna buy those. And then we're gonna sit in your kitchen, and you're gonna A, show me how to make this peanut butter, and B, give me a couple jars for free, and then C, I'm gonna help you start this thing." And
Once, yeah.
she ended up she doesn't do as much now because she's making a lot of money, but she's selling $10 jar custom peanut butter that she makes. And just with the clientele she had, she was like, geez, every time she wanted to sell 30 or 40 jars, it was like that to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And it's like, give you like a negative and turn it into a positive, and just by taking one step, just one little step.
And I always tell people like it's not that we don't want to do things. It's just that we get kind of caught up in,
Sure.
we're busy, we're all of this, and it's always just it's consistently just thinking about, defining the questions, right? Like who do I want to be? What do I want? And just making sure that as you're doing all of these activities, this is leading you to those thoughts, those ideas that you want to be for yourself. Even if you
Yep.
just say, who do I want to be as a role model? If you've got children, it's like, what do I want them to see?
So that was the thing I always struggled with my daughter. In pursuing comedy, I was like, listen, I always made good money in business, so we were always, we weren't rich, but we were always comfortable enough that we were
Yeah.
like, okay, and I knew things were going to be real tight, and they still are. I mean, clearly this the last year and a half, but I knew things would be real tight pursuing comedy, but also I had to ask myself, so am I being an irresponsible parent? And then it just dawned on me one day, and I was like, no, the irresponsible thing is to show my daughter that I have a life dream, and I'm too much of a scaredy cat to try
To
at it,
pursue
to
it.
try to pursue it, right? And to show her that, if you work hard, you can accomplish whatever you put your mind to, and that was the life lesson I wanted her to take from it. And and the other thing is the opposite of what my parents had said, which was, I don't want to be like, you got to get a good job. I want her to be happy over all else. However,
Of
you got to
course.
be
Yeah.
happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she's had her career goals in mind since the time she was 8 or 9 years old, and I fully support them. And if she
That's
turns
great.
around and decides she doesn't want to do that, what am I going to say? You know what? Then you can do whatever you want to do. You're only here one time around in this stupid rock, so you might as well do what you want and try your best.
And that, yeah, and that was really my life thing, was just it's life is short, and I decided that I was no longer going to waste any of it for
Yep.
myself.
And
And
you're an empath, like you said, and as an empathic person myself too, I think one of the things that you found that I found was the one of the greatest joys that I get is the same thing you get, which is making people happy or giving
yeah,
them some sort of happiness in their life or something to
yeah,
look forward to.
we have different outlets to do
Sure.
that,
Hmm.
but you make people happy one way, and I make them happy another way, and
Yep.
at the end, that's what drives.
The reward is there. It doesn't happen in comedy. It doesn't happen as much as I wish it did. But um, the probably the most thing, and I think almost any comedian that you talk to will tell you this. Um, you could do a crazy show and get paid a lot of money, and just be like, "Wow, I got that money just for some shit that I thought of in my head." Pardon my, I
Hmm.
swear. But
No, you're good.
you could think like, "Oh, I thought of that in my head, and now I just oh, I can buy this with that stupid thought that I had in my head." Um, yeah, that's great. And a new bit working, that's rewarding, whatever. A big show, signing autographs, taking pictures, meeting famous people, hanging out, becoming friends with famous people. All that stuff's cool. It's all cool benchmarks along the way. There's some surreal moments in my career that were super fun like that.
Yeah.
Um, but nothing beats the satisfaction of every once in a blue moon, someone will come up after a show and they'll say, "Hey, I just wanted to say thank you." They're not like, "You killed, you did." Hey, I just want to say thank you. Oh no, thank you for coming out. No, thank you. Uh, you know, I lost my brother 4 months ago,
Mhm.
and I haven't laughed in 4 months. Like that, and that
Yeah.
stuff. When it happens, it hits you. You go home like, I'm really doing something. Like I'm really
Yeah.
doing something.
Yeah.
And that gives you enough of a push
Well,
to.
because laughing is such a great release. It's such a great outlet. Like, we're all stressed, and we need outlets to relieve that stress. And laughing is one of them, man. It really
Yeah,
is.
I mean, I don't buy the whole it's the best medicine because I'm like pretty sure, like if you have cancer, chemo's probably up there. But it is uh, it is definitely good for the soul. It's good for the people that need it. It's good
Hmm.
for your blood pressure. It's scientifically good for you to laugh and to have a
Yeah.
decent time. Um,
And people haven't been able to do that, so I'm certainly
yeah,
excited for that to now. How is that? I know we're kind of going on time, and
yeah,
so
yeah.
before we start to wrap up, I just want to say, how is 2021 looking for that? And where do you see, especially with starting a new business, how do you
Yeah.
see this kind of playing a part for the future for you?
So the podcast is pretty interesting because basically the way we record a lot on Saturday mornings, right?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, if you have anybody that's listening to this that had a really bad idea, and they want to come on, just tell them to reach out to me.
Awesome.
Uh, but basically, the podcast we record like on Saturday or Sunday mornings, not mornings, but like afternoons, early afternoons, because I'm not on the road, I'm not traveling or whatever. The business is usually, weekday mornings, or excuse me, we'll do like a conference call to our guys overseas or something like that.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
might be at 5 at night or whatever. But comedy's coming back now. It's starting
yeah.
to come back. Like I'm going to be at Mohegan Sun the 18th, 19th, and 20th. I'm
Oh, great.
headlining City Steam, the old City Steam Brewery in Hartford on the I
Hmm.
think May 29th. I'm headlining comics at Mohegan again this month on the 28th. So I'm there, 4 times this month. So the shows are starting to come back. The money and all that stuff, because of reduced capacity, is not going to be great, if at all. But the big plus on it is it's starting to turn around.
Yeah,
Massachusetts is now going to be able to start having shows opening up, so that's
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Um, so when that happens, basically, it's still going to be a
It's
lag
yeah,
before I get on the road. But
but it
I'll
still sounds like you might be able to kind of mix all of this still together.
yeah.
And I would imagine, especially the businesses, probably you don't have to be tied to a certain location. So even if you're traveling, you can still accommodate. And that's the best thing. One of that's a great thing about architecting the life that you want is that you get to fit all of the things that are important to
Ho-
you, however they fit, and that's fantastic.
I'll tell you. I mean, one of the greatest joys about comedy. When I started comedy, my parents obviously were not thrilled. You know,
Sure.
they were like, "What? Whatever." My mother rolled her eyes to it, but was like, "Whatever." Um, she always said to me, "I'm not." I was like, "You don't even tell people I'm a comedian." She's like, "Well, I'm not telling anyone you're a comedian until you're a comedian." And I was like, "What?" She's like, "To me, you call me up the day that like you're sitting there with Tracy Morgan, and then I'll say you're a comedian." My mother loved Tracy Morgan from his SNL days,
Yeah.
and
Who
and
doesn't love Tracy Morgan?
yeah. So then, and we ended up, working together, and we ended up being friendly. And the first night we meet, we're sitting in the green room, and he's just making me laugh and everything. And I was just like, I just got to get a picture of us, which I don't always do. I got to do that. And can you leave a voice message, like, or like I did all the stuff you're not supposed to do as a comic, but I was like, this is important that
His
my mother accept.
mother.
He's like, oh shit, yeah, I'll do that. Like he's just a great guy, right? Um, but when my mom got sick, my mom passed away in November of
Yeah.
2018. But when my mom got sick, it was interesting because my brother, he's a 60-hour a week guy. He's a hardworking guy. He's a senior engineer at a big company near here. He kind of runs
Hmm.
a lot of stuff. Um, he works a ton. And my dad, even back then, even though he still had his faculties, he couldn't care for anyone. He medically or whatever.
Sure.
So it worked out well because I could be with my mom in the hospital every morning from 7 in the morning till 7 at night. And then my brother would come sometimes when he got out of work at 6 or whatever. And then on the weekends, my brother didn't have to work a lot of times. So he could cover on the weekends and I could go do my shows, and my
That's great.
mother, yeah, my mom, we were sitting there and I was like, mom, I was like, I got to be honest. I know you guys didn't like comedy, but pretty good now, right? Because I can still work and be here taking care of you. And she used to say it to my dad. She said it to all her friends. At the funeral, they were coming up to me like, by the way, your mother said, thank God for you doing comedy. She really approved of you doing and towards the end, she was like, she
Mhm.
went from being like, you really gonna do this to like, you can't blow off your shows because I was like, Mom, I'm staying this weekend. She's like, call your brother. You can't blow off your shows. I had shows in Washington D.C. And I was like, I don't know. And she's like, look, just leave. Your brother's gonna come. He's gonna cover.
Mm.
Um, I would prefer you don't drive, so fly. And 2 hours later, I was in Washington D.C. sitting in my suite waiting for my show, and I was just like,
That's great.
I was like, wow, like we came like we came that far
Hmm.
because we took that chance or because we followed the right thing. Your time you can never get back. You can have all the money in the
Hmm.
world, your time you're never going to get back. So if you can control your time and you can not answer somebody and not punch a clock and you can figure that out, highly suggest it. It's great.
Well, right, but if you don't understand your priorities, then
Right.
how do you know when to say no? How do you
Right.
know when to push back on different things? And yeah,
and that's and that's the
it's
thing. It's like what figure is something worth?
yeah.
Like listen, I got to be honest. There was some stuff I missed. I used to bum because I would find out about daddy daughter dances. I would always find out like 2 weeks before, and I'd be like, yeah, sorry, I'm in Tampa that day. I'm in
Yeah,
Georgia
yeah.
or whatever. So but I knew that I wanted that experience with my daughter. So there were 2 years that I literally was like, I'm not even going to book in February until I get the dates when the daddy
And
daughter dances are.
yeah.
And so I was able to do it, those 2 years that I was able to do it. Would I have loved to do it more? Yeah. But the way I looked at it is like, if this silly career pays off someday, and my daughter can have some comfort provided by it, then all of it was worth it,
And you're still providing a great thing that she gets to see,
Right.
because you're still following a passion, which is just a great role model to be to,
Sure.
and there's an understanding. It's not like you just didn't want to do it.
Right.
You made an effort at some point after realizing that you had missed some, and it's like, okay, well, I don't want to do that again, and so
Right.
here's
And
what
this
we're
is
going.
and this is
Yeah.
what I was going to tell you. But my point is, if you live with that purpose and you follow your dream, your passion, you're you're gonna make sacrifices. Your friends aren't gonna call you anymore. You're not gonna get invited to their shit, and then you are
Hmm.
gonna be home some night where you don't have anything going on. You're like, why didn't they call? Well, yeah, because you couldn't do all
Because you
those other
didn't.
times, so they forgot about you. And that's
Yeah.
that, and it hurts, but it's also it's the part of your soul
It's
that you
with.
sold to do what you love, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I said this, and I'll say it again. Like I was talking about my dad, the daddy daughter. This is a good example. If someone came to me and they're like, listen, you know, hey, your daughter's about to graduate from 8th grade. Are you gonna go to the graduation? 100%. But if someone came to me and said, hey, so and so wants you to do this gig, and it pays $500,000, and it's an hour, and it's whatever, you know what? I would be like, I'm gonna go do the $500,000. I'm gonna pay somebody to video it. I'll stay on FaceTime, and then I'll be like, hey, kid, here's your freaking college. It's paid for. You know what I mean? Like there's a
Yeah.
price to your sacrifice, and even if you think there's none, there's always a weight, and you just have
There's
to
always
weigh
just
it out
something.
on it. Right, right. and
Yeah.
and if someone comes to me with this gig's really, I don't care about it. But if it's a life changing gig, yeah, then you got to do it,
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, there's always a sacrifice to something, and
yeah.
because it's a choice. So when you're making
Right,
choices,
right.
you know,
But here's the
something.
thing, but people are like, oh, doesn't it suck because you're not around a lot of the weekends, you're on the road or whatever? Yeah, it does. However, I'm also there. Yesterday my daughter forgot her art supplies at home, so I'm there to drive them into her school. I'm also there
Hmm.
when she gets home from school. I'm also
Hmm.
there. It's like there's
And yeah,
trade off.
and so there's trade-offs with everything. Like you get
Right,
to have time when she's home from school, and she comes home, and maybe you have some cookies made, whatever. Like
right.
you get to have some of these moments that most
I
people
wouldn't be
don't get,
afforded. I wouldn't be afforded if I
because
was.
yeah, because most people are at work, and not home at that time, and
And when I
yeah,
was
you don't
working at
get those times.
Coca-Cola, I was working for some other, guy who these guys who had sold their lives out, and you're working for them, and yeah, they're making a good living, better than you are, right? Number one. Number two, you were working like a dog. You weren't working 40 hours a week. You were at
Hmm.
50, 60, 70. Oh, there's a big boss coming in. Everyone's got to go out to the stores. Yeah, oh, you got to work Saturday. You were missing. You had to do some of that stuff. So,
Hmm.
so
So there's times where you're missing things anyway because
exactly.
of somebody else's priorities, not even your own. And
Right.
then that's when things get defeating for people, right? It's
It's
like, man, it's hard to do.
it's the old thing, and it always puts pressure on people. But it is a true adage where they're like, if you don't pursue your dreams or work for your dreams to make them happen, you're going to work for somebody else who's making theirs.
To make their dreams happen.
Right, right. So,
Hmm.
I don't want to subcontract out my life to somebody else. I want to live it the best I can on my terms, as much as I can, and make the mistakes. And Lord knows I make a ton of them, but make those and learn from them, and just try to get better, and just keep do whatever it is you love. And if you don't know what you love, just you'll find it. Just find the path. Like in your
Yeah.
case, helping people, help them to turn their life around, helping them to lose weight, helping them do whatever it is that you're doing is making a positive difference in the universe, which is
Yeah.
better than throwing away. Not
That's
to
it.
not to say anything from anyone who's working a 9 to 5 at a
Oh no, hey,
company or
listen,
whatever.
we're all, yeah.
Great. But if you're working a 9 to 5 at a company, but you also have some nagging life dream that you wanted to follow, some passion, my advice is you can balance it. I did, and
Yeah.
just try and just see what happens.
Yeah.
Throw it out there.
Just
You know,
explore it, take that first step.
No one ever wants to be 82 in a nursing home and think back and be like, man, thank God I had all those great days in that cubicle. Like they don't, like God forbid I ever make it
So
to a
true.
nursing home. I will have the best. I will have story time every day, just telling
All
people
the
about my life.
time, for
Yeah.
real. I mean, it's going to
Yep.
be the most entertained facility.
Right. Exactly. Yep. So,
Excellent. Well, listen, Marty, I think that this is a great place to kind of wrap things up for us.
yeah, man.
I appreciate all that you do. Keep giving that back to people. Keep
Yep.
making them laugh. It really it feels good for the soul. So
I
thanks. And here's to really hoping that 2021 really starts to turn things around and you get back to doing your craft. And
appreciate it, man. I hope so too. And tell your people come out to a show. If they want to find me on social
yeah, you
media,
bet.
they can find me on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, any of that stuff. Check out our podcast. I'd love you to check that out too.
Totally.
I feel like you've lived a life full of good ideas. So I don't know what kind of bad ideas we
There
can
might have
have you,
been some bad ones, but I don't
but
know. Yeah.
but yeah, just by
Awesome.
all means. Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for having me on.
Excellent. Yeah, I appreciate your time, Marty. I really
Yep.
do. And it's really great to connect. Thanks
All right.
for
Thanks, Scott.
all right, man.